The battlefield was silent now, save for the faint hum of the Zorathian anti-gravity transports hovering over the scorched terrain of Dalkris 4. Smoke billowed into the murky red skies, remnants of the human resistance that had been crushed mere hours ago. The Zorathians had descended in their usual fashion, efficient, merciless, and completely assured of their dominance. Their war machines carved through human defenses like a blade through paper, leaving nothing but ruin in their wake. On board the Veil cutter, Captain Torixai surveyed the results of the battle from his command deck. The Zorathian warship, a sleek behemoth of shimmering black alloy, represented the pinnacle of their technological superiority. Torixai, a proud specimen of his kind, stood tall and imposing, his scaled body radiating authority. His eyes scanned the holographic report projected in front of him. Losses were minimal on their side, as always. Another sector conquered, another human outpost reduced to ash. "Bring me the prisoners," he commanded, his voice a guttural growl that carried across the bridge. Moments later, a squad of guards marched in, dragging behind them the only survivor of the latest skirmish. The prisoner was human, clad in battered armor that bore the insignia of Earth's unified defense force. His helmet had been removed, revealing a face smudged with dirt and streaked with blood. Despite his injuries, the soldier's eyes burned with defiance. Torixai tilted his head, intrigued. Most humans captured by the Zorathians were either trembling with fear or unconscious from their wounds. This one stood upright, his jaw clenched, his gaze unwavering. The guards shoved the human to his knees. "Captain, we found him hiding in the ruins of their forward command post," one of them reported. "He resisted capture, but his weapons were destroyed." Torixai stepped closer, studying the soldier. "A survivor," he mused aloud. "And here I thought humans lacked the fortitude to endure. What is your name, human?" The soldier didn't respond. He simply stared up at Torixai, his lips curling into a faint smirk. One of the guards raised the butt of his plasma rifle, ready to strike. "Answer the captain!" "Stand down," Torixai ordered, holding up a clawed hand. He crouched to meet the human's gaze, his voice lowering to a hiss. "You are aboard the Veil cutter, the flagship of the Zorathian conquest fleet. You are surrounded by my kind, superior in every way. Your comrades are dead, and your planet will soon follow. Do you understand the futility of your defiance?" The human finally spoke, his voice hoarse but steady. "Jake Harlan, Corporal, serial number 83911274. He paused, then added with a grin, "And you've got some really bad breath, by the way." There was a moment of stunned silence before the Zorathian crew erupted into laughter. Even the guards couldn't suppress their amusement. Torixai, however, did not laugh. His eyes narrowed, his scales darkening as his temper flared. He grabbed Jake by the front of his armor and hoisted him to his feet effortlessly. "You dare mock me, human?" Torixai growled, his voice laced with venom. Jake didn't flinch. "Yeah, well, you're the one making it easy. I mean, look at you. Did someone glue a lizard and a jellyfish together and call it a day?" The laughter grew louder, and Torixai's claws tightened around Jake's chest plate. With a snarl, he shoved the soldier backward, sending him sprawling to the floor. "Enough! Take him to the interrogation chamber. Let us see if his sense of humor survives the mind shard." Jake was dragged through the corridors of the Veil cutter, flanked by guards who no longer bothered to conceal their grins. Despite his situation, Jake took mental notes. The layout of the ship, the positioning of the guards, the placement of weapons lockers, it all registered in his mind, a survival instinct honed by years of combat. The interrogation chamber was as cold and sterile as the rest of the ship, its metallic walls glowing faintly with pulsating energy lines. In the center of the room, a crystalline device floated above a pedestal, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly light. This was the Mind Shard, a piece of Zorathian technology designed to extract memories and thoughts from its victims. Jake was forced into a chair, restraints locking his wrists and ankles in place. Turok's eye entered the chamber, his demeanor composed once more. He activated the mind shard with a wave of his hand, and the device began to hum, its light intensifying. "You may have resisted physically, human, but no one resists the mind shard," Turok's eye said, his voice calm and confident. "Soon, your mind will be laid bare, and we will learn everything we need to know about your kind." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Sounds fun. Do I get a souvenir photo?" The mind shard activated fully, a beam of energy enveloping Jake's head. For a moment he winced as the device probed his consciousness. Turok's eye watched expectantly, eager to see the memories of Earth's military strategies and weaknesses. What appeared on the holographic screens, however, was not what he had anticipated. Instead of tactical data, the screens displayed a series of bizarre and seemingly nonsensical images. Jake telling awful jokes to his squad mates. Jake attempting to juggle grenades and failing miserably. Jake wearing a makeshift cape made from a tarp, declaring himself the Lord of Improvisation. One particularly baffling image showed Jake moonwalking across a battlefield, plasma fire streaking past him, while his commanding officer yelled at him to stop. The Xorathians were stunned. Turok's eye's jaw tightened as he stared at the ridiculous montage of human absurdity. The guards in the room, however, couldn't hold back their laughter any longer. It started as muffled chuckles, then escalated into full-blown guffaws. What is this nonsense?" Turok's eye demanded, his scales flushing a deep, angry blue. Jake grinned through the energy beam. "Oh, that's just me being me. Guess your fancy brain scanner couldn't handle all the awesomeness." The guards were doubled over, their composure completely broken. Even Turok's eye's second-in-command, a stoic female Zorathian named Zerorin, had to turn away to hide her amusement. Turok's eye slammed his fist into the control panel, deactivating the mind shard. The beam dissipated and Jake slumped forward, his restraint still holding him in place. "Enough!" Turok's eye roared. "Take him to the holding cells. We will find another way to deal with him." As the guards dragged Jake out of the chamber, he turned his head and called back, "Tough crowd. I'll be here all week, though. Try the veal." The laughter echoed down the corridors, long after he was gone. Jake Harlan sat on the cold metallic floor of his holding cell, his back against the wall and his hands resting loosely on his knees. The cell was a small, oppressive cube of shimmering black alloy with faintly glowing blue lines running along the edges. The energy bars at the front hummed faintly, a constant reminder of his imprisonment. He tilted his head back, staring at the ceiling, and exhaled slowly. His ribs ached, his muscles were sore, and the faint coppery taste of blood lingered in his mouth. Yet, somehow, a wry grin tugged at the corner of his lips. He had managed to annoy them. That was something. Maybe not a victory, but definitely a small act of defiance against an enemy that treated his species like insects to be crushed. He could still hear the echoes of the guards' laughter in his mind. It was a strange thing, finding humor in the middle of a war. But humor had always been Jake's armor, his way of staying human in the face of chaos. He examined the liner. The sound of heavy footsteps approached, snapping Jake out of his thoughts. 2 Zorathian guards appeared outside his cell, their plasma rifles slung across their chests. The taller of the two, a hulking brute with deep red scales, glared at Jake. "Still smiling, human?" the guard growled, his voice a deep, guttural rumble. Jake leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Yeah, well, I figured I'd enjoy the ambience while it lasts. You guys really nailed the whole evil alien dungeon aesthetic. Props to your interior decorator." The red-scaled guard snarled, but his companion, a smaller Zorathian with green-tinted scales, chuckled despite himself. The red one shot him a glare, silencing him instantly. "Enough of your insolence," the red guard snapped, The captain will return for you soon, and when he does, you'll wish you'd kept that mouth shut." Jake tilted his head, feigning thought. I've heard that line before. Let me guess. Next comes the part where you threaten me with some unspeakable alien torture device? Or do you just skip straight to the monologue about how superior your species is?" The greenscale guard coughed, struggling to suppress another laugh. The red one shoved him roughly. "Silence!" Jake raised his hands, palms up. "Hey, don't blame him. I'm hilarious." The red guard growled low in his throat, stepping closer to the energy barrier. "Keep talking, human. I'd enjoy seeing you squirm." Jake leaned back against the wall, his grin widening. "Oh, I bet you would. But you're gonna have to wait your turn. Your captain's already got dibs." The guard opened his mouth to retort, but a sharp, commanding voice interrupted him. "That's enough." Both guards stiffened as Zero Rin strode into view, her tall, elegant form radiating authority. Her scales shimmered with a dark, iridescent hue, and her piercing silver eyes swept over the scene with cool detachment. "Captain Taraxi ordered the prisoner to be left unharmed until further notice," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Do I need to remind you what happens to those who disobey his commands?" The red guard's jaw tightened, and he stepped back reluctantly. "No, Commander." "Good. Then return to your posts." The guards exchanged a quick glance before retreating down the corridor, their footsteps fading into the distance. Zyrin turned her attention to Jake, her expression unreadable. "You have a talent for provoking my kind," she said, her tone neutral. Jake shrugged. "It's a gift. Comes naturally." She stepped closer to the energy barrier, studying him intently. "Most humans in your position would be trembling in fear, begging for mercy. Yet you mock us, even knowing the consequences." Jake met her gaze without flinching. "Begging doesn't work with you people. Figured I'd try something different." Her head tilted slightly, a gesture of curiosity. "Interesting. You confuse them, make them laugh when they should be angry. It's, disruptive." Jake smirked. "Disruptive's kind of my speciality. Ask anyone who's ever worked with me." We returned to the dining room. Zerarin regarded him silently for a moment before speaking again. "You are wasting your energy. Humor will not save you. Captain Taraxi will not be so easily swayed." "I'm not trying to sway him," Jake replied, his tone suddenly serious. "I'm just trying to stay human. You guys might have the tech, the ships, the firepower, but you don't understand what makes us tick. You think we're weak because we're messy, unpredictable, and stupid enough to joke in the face of danger, but that's exactly why we're still here, fighting back." For the first time, a flicker of something akin to respect crossed Sarah Orin's face. It was fleeting, barely perceptible, but Jake didn't miss it. She stepped back, her expression returning to its usual stoicism. "You speak boldly for a prisoner," she said, "but boldness alone will not change your fate." Jake watched her leave, his mind racing. He didn't know why she had lingered, why she seemed different from the others. But he filed the interaction away, another piece of the puzzle he was trying to solve. As the hours dragged on, Jake began to work. The Zorathians had underestimated him, and that was their first mistake. They thought their technology was infallible, their security unbreakable. But Jake had spent years on the battlefield, improvising and adapting to survive. He wasn't just a soldier, he was a survivor. The first step was subtle. He shifted his position, leaning casually against the wall near the energy barrier. From this angle he could study the control panel embedded in the wall outside his cell. The Zorathians' tech was advanced, but it followed certain logical patterns. Jake's keen eyes scanned the glowing symbols, searching for any sign of a weakness. And then there was the multi-tool. He'd managed to pocket it during the chaos of his capture, slipping it into a hidden compartment in his armor. It wasn't much, just a small, foldable device with a few basic functions. But it was enough. When the ship's lights dimmed, signaling the start of the Zorathian's rest cycle, Jake went to work. He crouched by the energy barrier, his movements slow and deliberate. The multi-tool fit perfectly into the tiny access port on the control panel, its metal prongs clicking into place. Jake twisted it carefully, his fingers working with practiced precision. Sparks flew, and the hum of the energy barrier fluctuated. Finally, with a faint hiss, the barrier deactivated. Jake exhaled, a grin spreading across his face. "Not bad for a primitive," he muttered to himself. Slipping into the corridor, Jake moved quickly but quietly. The ship's design was sleek and efficient, with smooth, curved walls that reflected the faint blue glow of the energy lines running through them. Jake kept to the shadows, avoiding the patrolling guards. He needed a weapon, and he needed a plan. But look out! The storage room was his first stop. It took some trial and error to bypass the door's lock, but eventually it slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, Jake found exactly what he was looking for: a plasma rifle and a handful of grenades. He slung the rifle over his shoulder, his confidence growing. From there, he made his way toward the ship's engine room. The Zorathians were meticulous engineers, but even their technology wasn't perfect. Jake had overheard snippets of conversation during his capture, enough to piece together the layout of the Veil Cutter. If he could sabotage the power core, it would create enough chaos for him to escape. The engine room was vast, its walls lined with pulsating conduits and towering machinery. In the center of the room stood the power core, a massive sphere of crackling energy suspended in midair. Jake approached cautiously, his eyes scanning for security measures. With a grenade in hand, he set to work. When the explosion came, it was deafening. The power core shuddered, its energy surging wildly. Alarms blared throughout the ship, and the red emergency lights cast an eerie glow over the corridors. Jake didn't stick around to admire his handiwork. He sprinted toward the hangar bay, plasma rifle in hand. The chaos worked in his favor. Guards were scrambling in every direction, shouting orders and trying to contain the damage. Jake slipped through the confusion, taking down anyone who got too close. By the time he reached the hangar, his heart was pounding and adrenaline coursed through his veins. A small Zorathian shuttle sat docked at the far end of the bay, its sleek design promising speed and maneuverability. Jake's ticket home. But as he approached, a familiar figure stepped into his path. Taunts, flanked by a squad of heavily armed guards, blocked the shuttle with a menacing snarl. "You think you can escape, human?" Taunts growled. "You've humiliated us, sabotaged our ship, and now you dare to steal from us? You will not leave this place alive." Jake raised his rifle, his smirk returning. "Oh, I'm leaving, all right, and I'm taking a little souvenir with me." With that, he fired. Jake's finger squeezed the trigger of the plasma rifle, sending a bolt of blue energy streaking toward Taunts. The Zorathian captain moved with surprising speed for someone of his size, ducking to the side as the bolt struck the wall behind him in a shower of sparks. The hangar bay erupted into chaos. Guards dove for cover, shouting orders in their guttural language, while others raised their weapons and opened fire. Jake darted to the nearest stack of cargo crates, the plasma bolts sizzling past him and scorching the floor. He slammed his back against the crates, taking a moment to catch his breath. His mind raced, weighing his options. The shuttle was just ahead, its sleek black frame beckoning like a lifeline. But between him and freedom stood Taunts and a dozen armed Zorathians. A voice boomed through the hangar, cutting through the cacophony of weapons fire. "Surrender now, human!" Taunts bellowed, his deep voice amplified by the acoustics of the massive chamber. "You cannot win this. Lay down your weapon, and I may yet grant you a quick death." Jake chuckled under his breath. "Yeah, that's a hard pass," he muttered. He leaned out from behind the crates, firing a rapid volley of plasma bolts at the Zorathians. One guard went down, his weapon clattering to the floor, but the others quickly adjusted, their shots peppering Jake's position. He ducked back, gritting his teeth as the heat from a near miss singed the edge of his armor. He needed a distraction, something big enough to throw off their coordination. His hand brushed against the remaining grenades clipped to his belt, and an idea began to form. Jake armed one of the grenades, its small activation light blinking rapidly, and lobbed it over the crates without looking. He counted silently. 1, 2, 3. The explosion rocked the hangar, the blast wave sending debris flying and temporarily disorienting his enemies. Ah! Jake seized the opportunity, vaulting over the crates and sprinting toward the shuttle. The guards were still reeling, their movements sluggish as they struggled to regroup. Plasma bolts streaked past him, but none found their mark. Toroxai roared, his voice full of rage. "Stop him! Do not let him escape!" Jake reached the shuttle, slamming his hand against the control panel. The boarding ramp extended with a hiss of pressurized air, and he scrambled inside, slamming the ramp shut behind him. The interior of the shuttle was sleek and minimalistic, the controls glowing faintly in the dim light. He slid into the pilot's seat, his fingers flying over the unfamiliar controls. Come on," he muttered, his pulse racing. The Zorathian language was unintelligible to him, but the symbols on the console had a certain logic to them. He pressed a series of buttons, and the shuttle's engines roared to life. Outside, Toroxai and his guards regrouped, their weapons trained on the shuttle. Plasma bolts hammered against the hull, but the craft's shields absorbed the impacts. Jake grinned, his confidence surging. "Time to go," he said to himself, gripping the controls. He pushed the throttle forward and the shuttle lurched upward, its thrusters igniting in a blaze of blue energy. The hangar bay doors began to close, the massive panels grinding together in a desperate attempt to trap him inside. Jake's heart pounded as he angled the shuttle toward the narrowing gap. The controls were sluggish, unresponsive to the fine adjustments he was used to. He gritted his teeth, forcing the ship forward with everything it had. The shuttle squeezed through the gap just as the doors slammed shut behind it. Jake let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding, his hands gripping the controls tightly. The black void of space stretched out before him, the stars glinting like scattered diamonds. But his relief was short-lived. The shuttle's sensors beeped loudly, alerting him to multiple incoming signals. He glanced at the display and felt his stomach drop. A squadron of Zorathian fighters had launched from the Veil Cutter, their sleek, predatory shapes cutting through the darkness as they closed in on his position. "Of course," Jake muttered, slamming his hand against the console. "Couldn't make it too easy, could you?" The fighters opened fire, their plasma gannets lighting up the void. Jake yanked the controls hard to the right, the shuttle rolling out of the way as bolts of energy streaked past. The craft shuddered under the strain, its shields absorbing what hits it couldn't dodge. "Shot!" Jake's fingers danced over the console, searching for the weapons system. His thumb found a switch, and the shuttle's HUD lit up with targeting reticles. "All right, let's see what you've got," he said, gritting his teeth. He swung the shuttle around, its forward cannons blazing to life. The first burst caught one of the fighters in the wing, sending it spiraling out of control before it exploded in a flash of light. Jake whooped, but the celebration was short-lived as the remaining fighters swarmed around him, their plasma bolts hammering his shields. The shuttle's system screamed warnings at him, the shields flickering dangerously low. Jake's mind raced. He couldn't outfight them, not in this bucket of bolts. He needed a new plan, and fast. Then he saw it. In the distance, the Veil Cutter loomed like a dark monolith, its sleek form blotting out the stars. Jake's eyes narrowed as an idea took shape. It was reckless, borderline suicidal, but it was his only chance. He angled the shuttle toward the massive ship, its engines straining as he pushed them to their limits. The fighters gave chase, their plasma bolts peppering his hull. Jake gripped the controls tightly, weaving through the firestorm as he closed the distance to the Veil Cutter. The Zorathians must have realized his intent, because the ship's point defense turret sprang to life, filling the space around him with deadly energy. Jake clenched his jaw, his focus narrowing to the sliver of a path ahead. He juked left, then right, dodging turret fire and fighter bolts alike. The shuttle screamed in protest as it skimmed along the Veilcutter's hull, the shield sparking with every near miss. Jake's hands moved instinctively, guiding the craft with precision born of desperation. Finally, he spotted his target, a docking port near the ship's midsection. It was small, barely large enough for the shuttle to fit, but it was his best shot. Jake angled the shuttle downward, his heart hammering in his chest. "Come on," he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. "Come on." The shuttle slammed into the docking port with a bone-jarring impact, its landing struts groaning under the strain. Jake wasted no time. He grabbed the plasma rifle and the last of his grenades, slamming his fist against the emergency hatch release. The door hissed open and he leapt out, landing in a crouch on the Veilcutter's interior deck. Alarms blared throughout the ship, and Zorathian soldiers were already converging on his position. Jake raised the rifle, firing in controlled bursts as he made his way deeper into the ship. He didn't have a plan beyond survival, but that was enough for now. The corridors were a maze of glowing conduits and sleek metal, the walls vibrating with the hum of the ship's power core. Jake moved quickly, his boots pounding against the deck. He ducked into side passages, using his grenades to create blockades and buy himself time. He could hear the Zorathians closing in, their guttural shouts echoing through the halls. But Jake didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Every step was a gamble, every corner a potential ambush. Then he saw it. The ship's main hangar, a massive chamber filled with shuttles and fighters, its far wall dominated by an enormous energy barrier that separated the interior from the vacuum of space. Jake's breath caught. If he could disable the barrier, he could vent the hangar and take out the remaining fighters. He sprinted toward the control console, firing wildly to keep the guards at bay. Plasma bolts zipped past him, but he reached the console and slammed his hand against the controls. The energy barrier flickered, then dissipated with a low hum. The vacuum of space tore through the hangar, pulling shuttles, fighters, and Zorathian soldiers into the void. Jake grabbed onto the console, his body straining against the pull. He watched as the chaos unfolded, the Zorathians' own technology turned against them. When the emergency bulkheads finally slammed shut, sealing the hangar, Jake collapsed onto the deck, gasping for air. His body ached, his head throbbed, but he was alive. And he wasn't done yet.